Hello, this is Gordon Now, aka World of Depth, and thanks to the virtual stereoscopic community for having me come today to gently mess with your head and talk about how to creatively use 3D slices and other shapes to make stereos such as the still version of this one, and such as this, which by the way is derived from just one stereo image. Now a quick format note, the methods I'm going to go over today will require making separate adjustments to the left and right eye images, and therefore I'm going to show all the stereos as stereo pairs, like this one, with cross on top and parallel on bottom. However, if you'd like to see anaglyphs of the finished stereos, please visit my website worldofdepth.com, and I'll drop the link in the chat and video description. All you need to start is a stereophoto and a program that does layers. I recommend Photopea, that's photopea.com, which is a free online analog of Photoshop. We're going to start off our slice or other shape by selecting the same area in both the left and right eye images. You can do this by starting with the two images stacked on top of each other, making the same selection in both layers, and then dragging one layer plus its new selection layer off to the side. So what can we do with a slice? Well, one thing is flip it upside down, like so. Another thing we can do is mirror it, or flip it horizontally. Notice that in the original, the head of our subject in this slice is leaning to our left. If we mirror it, we can see the subject's head is now leaning to the right, but there's a problem. Because we've flipped each slice left to right, we've also inverted the horizontal distance between analogous points in the slices. In other words, we've inverted the depth. So how can we de-invert or re-invert the depth? Well, we can just swap slices between the left and right eye images, like this. Now we can see the subject is mirrored and the depth is correct. Another format note for these triple pane stereo images, the CrossEye stereo pair is on the left and the parallel on the right. Let's say we want to flip half of this flower upside down, but instead of using a slice, a rectangle. So as before, let's select the same area in the left and right eye images, something like this. Notice that the selection area appears to lie at screen depth. This will always be the case when we make the same selection in the left and right eye images. If we flip it upside down, we get this. So there's something weird going on here. If we look at the virtual edges of our rectangle, the top edge, right edge, bottom edge are okay, but there's a problem with the left edge. And we can see this more clearly if we replace the rectangle with a solid block temporarily. We can see the block is colliding with the flower, cutting it off, in what we might call an internal window violation, or in general, an edge violation. So to fix this, what we need to do is raise the selection area up off of the screen, so it floats above the flower instead of cutting into it. To do this, we shift its position horizontally in opposite directions in the left and right eye images. To bring it closer to the viewer, we move the two areas farther apart from each other in the CrossEye stereo pair and closer to each other in the parallel version, as you can see here. Try viewing this both fused and unfused to see the shift and the result. So here was our original selection at screen depth, and here is the new one. Now when we flip it upside down, we can see the edges of our virtual window, which now appears to float above the screen, look fine. Here's another example. Let's say we want to punch circular holes through this tree bark and see through it to another stereo scene. If we start as before and select the same areas in the left and right eye images, we get circles that appear to lie at screen depth. If we punch out these holes, we get this. Less holes and more floating circles. So we need to go back to our original selections and sync them into the screen. If we place them just underneath the bark, it looks like this. Now if we cut them out, we indeed do get holes, but now we have a problem of some edge violations inside them. To fix this, we're not going to shift the selection areas, because we already did that to place the holes in the bark, but we're going to shift the underlying stereo scene and push it farther away from us. Like this. Now if you look closely, you might notice small discrepancies around the edges of the holes, and that's because we're trying to place a flat circle on a non-flat surface. But it's pretty close in this case. Speaking of flat shapes, we can change them in certain ways pretty easily. So we've gone over how we can bring shapes forward or push them back by moving them horizontally in different directions in the left and right eye images. But in addition to moving entire shapes, sometimes we can move just parts of shapes or just certain dimensions of shapes. For example, here I've used the transform controls in Photopea and selected only certain control points to move horizontally in order to adjust the depth of the sides and the tops and bottoms of these circles. Here is what these altered shapes would look like as cutouts. Now let's look at how I used these concepts and others in some example stereos. For this stereo, I wanted to take slices of my head and displace them without changing their depth, so I made sure to move them horizontally by the same amount in the left and right eye images. In this follow-up, I did the same thing, only displacing diagonally by the same amount. For this image, I started with two very similar stereos and basically shuffled together alternating slices of them. The trick here was to very carefully choose and place the slices to avoid any edge violations in either original stereo. Here's another example. I noticed the very different colors in the top and bottom halves of this stereo and thought, how can I mix them together? What I hit upon was to use these circular areas, placed very carefully with respect to depth, as sort of portals through which to view an upside-down version of the original stereo. Here it is, with some adjustments to the depth of the layer underneath. In this example, I decided not to shift or flip the slice, but instead to differentiate it with color. Also notice I've tilted the slice itself, making it recede into the screen as you go from bottom to top. And as you might guess, I did this by horizontally shifting the top of the slice while keeping the bottom in place. So there you go, a brief intro to 3D slices and shapes. Once you know the basic concepts, it really is pretty easy and quite fun to play around with these in your stereos. I hope this has helped to expand your stereo mind and hasn't shuffled your brain too badly. If you found this video interesting and helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel for more. If you have questions, drop them in the comments below or send them via worldofdepth.com. Cheers and happy experimenting to you. If you post your own on social media, I suggest using the hashtag 3DSlices. Thanks for listening, and remember, everything is better in 3D.